You ever sit in a room full of celebration and still feel like you're being erased? I was at the back of the auditorium, third row from the wall, squeezed between a crying aunt and a father yelling into his phone. All I could see of the stage was a sliver of blue and the edge of the podium. But I didn't mind. I hadn't come for a seat. I came to see my daughter walk across the stage and become something I never got the chance to be, a college graduate. Only that day, she didn't see me. Or maybe she did and just didn't want to. I'm Ramona Daniels. I'm 44 years old. I work the night shift at a hotel cleaning rooms guests don't remember messing up. My hands ache every morning. My back screams when I bend too long. But I've kept us afloat, me and my daughter Layla, since her father left when she was 5. I gave up everything for her to have the life I never did. And in return, she asked me to stay in the back. No family brunch. No pictures. Not even a seat with her stepdad and his polished relatives in the front row. Just a vague, "You can come if you want." She hadn't always been that way. Layla used to cling to my leg when she was little, always asking me to read to her or braid her hair before school. She used to draw pictures of us holding hands with little hearts around our names. But college changed her. Or maybe it revealed parts of her I hadn't wanted to see. The invitations came out a month before graduation. Her stepfather's name, Martin, and her mother's maiden name, Layla Marie Robinson. Not Daniels. Not even a mention. That was my first warning. The second came 2 nights before graduation when I overheard a conversation Layla didn't know I was close enough to hear. She was on the phone in the kitchen, pacing near the sink. No, I didn't invite her to brunch. She wouldn't fit in. It's mostly donors and faculty. Her voice wasn't cruel, just indifferent, like I was some odd relative she barely knew. I stood in the hallway, her cap and gown still in my hands. I'd spent half my paycheck getting it altered just right, taking it to the seamstress downtown to make sure it fit her like a queen. The third warning came the morning of the ceremony. Martin had rented a limo. I wasn't asked to join. They left without a word, even though I was awake and dressed, standing by the door like a fool. So I took the bus. I wore a simple gray dress and flats I'd kept in decent shape. I tucked a card into my purse, handwritten with every ounce of love I could spill onto the page. It wasn't fancy, just something to let her know I was proud. I walked into that auditorium feeling like a ghost. But I still clapped the loudest when they called her name. Layla Marie Robinson, summa cum laude. The crowd cheered. I stood and clapped until my palms stung. I watched her glide across the stage, confident, radiant, and completely unwilling to look toward the back rows. But the twist came later. After the ceremony, they held a small reception in the university's ballroom. Food, speeches, photos. I hadn't planned to attend. But as I waited for the crowd to thin and maybe sneak a hug in, an elderly woman in a dark green dress approached me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place her. "You're Ramona, aren't you? Layla's mother?" I nodded cautiously. I thought so. I saw the article she wrote last fall, about growing up in a broken home. It was compelling. My blood ran cold. I had never read that article. Layla had told me she was submitting something to the campus journal, but I assumed it was about her studies, maybe her research in political science. I never imagined she'd write about me and call it broken. The woman must have seen the confusion on my face. "I'm Dean Caldwell. I teach in the English department." Her piece was praised for its honesty, though I must admit, it painted a rather bleak portrait of you. I forced a polite smile. My legs felt unsteady. The room spun slightly. I clutched my purse tighter. "She's a gifted writer," I said, the words catching in my throat. The dean nodded and moved on. I stood frozen in place, trying to decide whether to leave or confront Layla. Then I heard the microphone tap. Layla stood at the front of the ballroom. She had been asked to give a closing speech, something about student leadership and triumph. The room hushed as she cleared her throat. She started well enough, thanking professors, acknowledging peers. Then came the part that felt like a slap to the face. I was raised by a single mother. She did what she could, but there were many years of hardship. I learned to parent myself in many ways. A ripple of polite, Sympathetic nods rolled through the crowd. My stomach twisted. She struggled. Layla continued. But that's why I'm so grateful to Martin. He gave me the stability I never had. The vision. The structure. I stopped listening after that. My ears buzzed. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my chest. I turned to leave, but a voice behind me stopped me cold. Ma'am, the dean would like you to speak. Layla mentioned you were here, and Dean Caldwell insists. I blinked, confused. Speak. He nodded. At the podium. Parents are being acknowledged. They asked for volunteers. But Dean Caldwell wants you specifically. My hands shook. I'd come to disappear quietly. But now, in front of all the people who had just clapped for my daughter's airbrushed version of the truth, I was being invited to speak. I could have declined. I could have walked out, let Layla's version of the story stay intact. But instead, I stepped forward. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. As I walked toward the podium, it felt like I was walking through water, slow, thick, and impossible to retreat from. Every step rang louder than the last. A few heads turned, then more. By the time I reached the stage, a quiet murmur had settled over the crowd. Layla saw me. She was still holding the microphone, lips parted slightly, confusion flickering across her face. Her eyes darted to Martin, then to the dean, as if silently asking, why her? Why me? Dean Caldwell stood off to the side, arms crossed, face unreadable. I didn't touch the mic at first, just looked out over the room. Tables filled with pressed suits and sparkling dresses. Silver cutlery clinked against glass. Napkins folded into roses. A perfectly curated moment. And here I was, an outsider. The woman Layla had edited out of her story. I took a deep breath and reached for the microphone. My fingers trembled slightly as I wrapped them around it. I wasn't planning to speak today. I began, my voice soft but steady. I wasn't even sure I was wanted here. That sentence landed like a soft slap. A few gasps, a rustle of uncomfortable movement. But I raised the woman you just applauded. I continued. I held her when she cried, sat beside her when she was sick, skipped meals so she wouldn't have to, and worked double shifts so she could have piano lessons she quit 2 weeks later. The tension in the room grew electric. Layla's eyes widened. Her shoulders stiffened, and I saw her jaw tighten like she was bracing for impact. I'm not saying that to shame her, I said quickly. I'm saying it because sometimes stories leave out chapters. And those chapters matter. I looked directly at her now. You told the truth, baby.
I know you did.
I was tired. I did struggle. And maybe I did fall short more times than you'll ever know. But don't you dare forget who carried you through those years. A few people shifted uncomfortably. 1 or 2 lowered their eyes. I'm proud of you, I added, voice beginning to shake. Not just because of the degree or the medals or that speech. I'm proud of you because you made it. Then I paused. And I know now, I didn't just raise a woman. I raised a survivor. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt to watch that survival rewrite me into a shadow. Layla's lip trembled. For the first time, she looked small. Not in stature. In spirit. Like a child again. Lost in a story that had spun out of her control. I came here to clap for you from the back, I finished. But if today was about truth, I needed mine to be heard, too. I handed the mic back and stepped down. Silence. For several long seconds, the room didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, someone, an older woman in the back, began to clap. Softly at first, then louder. Then others joined. A strange, hesitant applause filled the room. Not thunderous, not triumphant, but real. Layla didn't clap. She stood frozen, her mouth slightly open. And for a long moment, she didn't move. Then she turned and walked off the stage. Not toward me. Out the side door. Martin stood slowly, hesitated, then followed her. Dean Caldwell met me at the edge of the stage. That, she said with a nod, was long overdue. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt emptied, as if I had poured something out that had been rotting inside me for years. I didn't stay for dessert. As I stepped out into the cold air, I realized I'd left the card I wrote for Layla on the table beside my seat. I almost turned back for it, but I didn't. That night, the house was quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, picking at a plate of cold takeout, wondering if I'd gone too far. Wondering if I'd humiliated her. Then, just before midnight, the front door creaked open. Layla stepped inside, alone. Her makeup had smeared. Her heels dangled from her fingers. And her eyes, those same eyes I used to kiss tears from, were glassy. She didn't speak right away. Just stood there in the doorway like she didn't know if she belonged. I didn't say anything either. Eventually, she walked over and sat down across from me. Her hands trembled as she reached for a napkin. "I didn't know you heard the phone call," she whispered. I nodded once. "I did." She swallowed hard. "I wasn't trying to erase you. I just thought it would be easier if I made it cleaner. Less complicated." I stared at her. "You mean easier for you?" She didn't argue. "I know you did everything for me, Mama," she said finally. "I know that. I just didn't want people to see where I came from and think that's all I was." I blinked back tears. "But it is part of who you are. And pretending otherwise doesn't make it disappear. It just makes me disappear." We sat in that silence for a long time. She looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. "I'm sorry," she said. I nodded. "That's a start." Then she reached into her purse and pulled out the card I thought I'd left behind. "I went back for it," she said, "after you left." I felt my throat tighten. I read it. Every word. We didn't say anything else that night. Just sat in that fragile quiet, letting the truth settle between us. The next day, I found a new article draft open on her laptop. Title: "The Woman I Tried to Edit Out." The next morning, the air in the house was different. Not heavy, not hostile. Just quiet. Like everything inside us was catching its breath. Layla slept in later than usual. When she finally came downstairs, her cap and gown still hung on the coat rack, slightly wrinkled from being tossed carelessly the night before. She didn't look at it. Instead, she made coffee, our old ritual, one we hadn't shared in years. "I'll pour it," she said softly, already grabbing the chipped blue mug she used to call her good luck cup in high school. I sat at the table, unsure what to say. The speech, the walkout, the midnight return, it had all hit me like a storm, and now the waters were receding, exposing everything that had been hiding underneath. She slid the mug toward me, then sat down across from me again, just like the night before. But this time, her hands weren't trembling. "I didn't think it'd blow up like that," she started. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean telling a room full of donors and faculty that your mother practically raised you with nothing but bad decisions and dollar store dinners?" She winced. "I didn't mean for it to sound that way. I thought it was inspiring." "Only if I'm dead," I said, not bitter, just honest. "Only if I'm a character you've moved on from, not someone still sitting at the kitchen table." Layla stared at her hands, picked at her nails. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I guess I wanted to rewrite it all. Make it prettier. Cleaner. Something that didn't embarrass me." That stung. More than I thought it would. But I understood. "You're not the only one who's ever wanted to clean up their story," I said. "But you don't do it by erasing the people who helped you survive it." She nodded slowly. "I know." There was a long pause, filled only by the soft hum of the refrigerator. Then she asked something that surprised me. "Do you think Martin's going to be mad?" I blinked. "Why would he be mad?" She looked uncertain. "He's proud of the speech." Or he was. He helped me write it. Said it was smart to lean into the overcoming adversity angle. Said it made me relatable but impressive. I sat back, the weight of those words sinking in. "Did he tell you to leave me out?" She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "I didn't think it was that big of a deal," she said. "He said it's not about being honest, it's about being strategic." I exhaled sharply. Of course he did. Martin had always been about strategy, perception, presentation. Even when Layla was in high school, he'd show up with advice and checklists, resume templates, networking seminars. He was a man of polished shoes and planned narratives. I had always wondered if he saw Layla as his protege or his project. I just wanted to belong, she admitted.
To them.
To that world. I nodded slowly. But belonging shouldn't cost you your mother. Layla looked up then, her eyes red but steady. Do you think I can fix it? I think that depends on what you're willing to admit. Later that afternoon, Martin called. Layla let it go to voicemail. Then he texted. We should talk. That moment yesterday, it could be damaging. Layla read it aloud to me. I said nothing, just watched her. Then, without prompting, she opened her laptop and pulled up the draft article I'd seen the night before, the woman I tried to edit out. I want to publish this, she said. Not just online. In the school's feature magazine. The one that gets sent out to alumni and donors. I stared at her. You sure you're ready for that? I'm not. But I need to be. She turned the screen toward me. I began reading. The opening lines stopped me cold. My mother once washed and reused plastic sandwich bags because we couldn't afford to buy new ones. I thought it was embarrassing. Now I see it was resourceful. Strong. Brave. I kept reading. Each paragraph peeled back something raw and real, things she had been ashamed to admit, things I had never expected her to even notice. There was one line I read twice. I was raised by a woman who didn't get invited to brunches, but showed up anyway, because love isn't always polite. It's persistent. By the time I reached the end, my vision blurred with tears. Layla waited quietly. What do you think? She asked. I said, you finally told the whole story. She smiled. Not broadly. Just enough. Then she hit send. That evening there was a knock at the door. Martin. He stood on the porch, wearing one of his tailored suits, holding a garment bag over one arm. His expression was tight, controlled. But there was tension in his posture, like someone bracing for a PR crisis. Can I come in? He asked. Layla hesitated, then nodded. He stepped inside, looked around like he hadn't been there in years, which, to be fair, he hadn't. I just wanted to drop off this, he said, handing her the garment bag. It's the dress for the gala. Next week. Layla took it silently, then said, I'm not going. Martin blinked. What do you mean? I'm not going. I declined the invitation. But you're the student honoree. You're being recognized for your speech. Then they'll have to recognize someone else, she said firmly. Martin's eyes flicked to me, then back to her. Is this about yesterday? Layla nodded. It's about everything. I'm done pretending. I'm done editing. Martin's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. I appreciate what you've done for me, Layla said gently. But you don't get to write my story. I do. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I think it's time I started being proud of all of it, she added. Even the parts that make other people uncomfortable. With that, Martin gave a tight nod and turned to leave. He didn't say goodbye. That night, we had dinner together, just me and Layla. Macaroni and cheese, garlic toast, store-bought coleslaw. Nothing fancy, but it felt sacred. Halfway through, she looked up from her plate and said, I think I want to go into journalism. Real journalism, not filtered PR. I smiled. You'd be good at that. I think so too. And for the first time in a long time, I saw her clearly, not as the little girl I once protected, not as the stranger who stood on a stage and erased me, but as the woman she was becoming. A woman who knew her story was finally, truly hers. It hit the university paper first. The morning after Layla submitted her article, the editor reached out to her directly. Said it was the most honest thing they'd read all year. Said it needed to be printed, unedited. By Friday, it wasn't just in the school magazine. It had been picked up on the university's alumni newsletter and reposted by a handful of student blogs. By Monday, it was on the bulletin board outside the English department. That's when the phone calls started. Not angry ones, surprisingly. Not yet. The first was from Dr. Benjamin, the head of the journalism department. He invited Layla to coffee. Said he wanted to talk about her voice. The second was from a student Layla barely remembered from freshman year. She called to say thank you. Said she had a single mom too. Said Layla's story gave her permission to stop pretending she was from somewhere else. But the third call, that one came from Martin. She didn't answer. She let it go to voicemail. I was sitting on the couch when she played it on speaker. Layla, I hope you know what you've done. You've made some powerful people look foolish. You had a platform, and you used it to make a statement instead of an impression. Don't throw away years of work just to make your mother feel seen. We stared at the phone in silence. Then Layla laughed. A single, humorless sound. He still thinks this is about him, she said. I reached over and took her hand. It's always about him. Until you take the pen away. Later that week, Layla asked if we could visit my old apartment, the one she was born in, long before Martin ever came into the picture. We hadn't been back in over a decade.
It had changed.
New paint, new railing, a different mail slot. But the bones were the same. This is where I wrote my first story, she said, smiling. That one about the moon getting lonely. I nodded. You cried when I made the moon find a friend. You cried too. We laughed, softly. The door was different now, but I could still picture it. The chipped wood, the rusted hinges. The way she used to sit beside it with a stack of picture books and read to the hallway like it was an audience. She walked down the narrow path toward the courtyard and stood beneath the same scraggly tree we used to tie ribbons to on her birthday. I thought I hated this place, she said. But now it feels like the only place I was ever honest. I looked around, letting the years settle. Home isn't where things are perfect, I said. It's where you learn to survive the imperfections. She didn't respond right away. But when she finally did, it wasn't with words. She took her phone from her bag, opened her camera, and snapped a photo of the old tree. Then she posted it with a caption that made my breath catch. We don't always bloom where we're planted. Sometimes we bloom where we fought not to be buried. That post got more likes than anything she'd ever shared. But with attention came backlash. Some people from the university board weren't happy. A donor reportedly pulled their sponsorship from the gala Layla was meant to headline. Rumors began swirling. That she was ungrateful. That she had betrayed the institution that supported her. And yet more students kept reaching out. One girl said her father had always told her not to overshare, and now she was rethinking what sharing really meant. Another said she read the article aloud to her mom, and they cried together over microwave mac and cheese. Layla printed those messages, taped them to her bedroom mirror. Every morning she looked at them instead of the dress Martin had left hanging in the closet. One evening, a package arrived. No name, just a return address from someone in the communications office. Inside was a silver pin, the university's medal for distinction in narrative integrity. Layla stared at it, silent. I don't even know what to do with this, she whispered. You wear it, I said. Not because they gave it to you, but because you earned it. She paused, then pinned it to her old hoodie. Not a gown, not a blazer, just herself. The next day, Layla asked if I wanted to visit the campus with her. She had a speaking engagement, just a small one, she said. A student panel about storytelling in the modern age. I assumed it would be a classroom with maybe 20 kids. Casual. Low-key. What I didn't expect was a packed auditorium. Hundreds of students, a few faculty, and even a local news station that had picked up interest in her article. Layla sat on stage beside two other students, a small microphone clipped to her collar. I watched from the third row, near the middle this time. She looked calm. Poised. Confident, but not rehearsed. I used to think success meant hiding where you came from, she said into the mic. Now I think it means owning it, every crooked, cracked piece of it. Because that's where the light gets in. I felt tears prick at my eyes again. I'd spent years wondering if Layla would ever see me as more than a placeholder in her story. Now she was writing new chapters, with me in them. After the panel, she pulled me aside backstage. I want you to speak at the next one, she said. Tell your side. I blinked. I'm not a speaker. You're a survivor, she said. That's louder than anything. I laughed. You're gonna get me into trouble. She smiled wide. Then we'll get in trouble together. That night, after we got home, we sat on the porch, no speeches, no panels, no audience. Just us. She rested her head on my shoulder, like she used to as a kid. "You know what I realized?" she said quietly. "The stories I tried to bury, they're the ones I needed to tell the most." I nodded. "And the mother I tried to hide," she added, squeezing my hand, "is the one I'm most proud to be connected to." I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, I felt it. That subtle but powerful click when something broken begins to fit back together again. Not perfectly, but truthfully. And sometimes, that's the only kind of healing that lasts. 1 week after Layla's article went public, the letter arrived. It was addressed to her, but sealed with the gold crest of the university board. Layla found it in the mailbox, wedged between a stack of alumni flyers and a coupon booklet for a frozen pizza chain. She stared at it for a long time before opening it. I was in the kitchen when she walked in, envelope clutched in her hand like it might explode. "You might want to sit," she said. I raised an eyebrow, but did as she asked. She opened the letter slowly, her fingers trembling just slightly. Then she read aloud. "Dear Miss Robinson, the University Board of Trustees would like to formally invite you and your family to the annual Vision Gala, where you will be honored as this year's recipient of the Student Voice Legacy Award. We recognize the courage and honesty in your recent article and believe your voice reflects the core values of our institution: truth, growth, and integrity." Layla stopped, stunned. I blinked. They read it. They didn't just read it. They're giving me an award for it. There was a long pause. Then I smirked. "Bet Martin's having a field day." Layla laughed. Really laughed this time. I doubt they even told him. The invitation was printed on thick cream cardstock, the kind with pressed lettering that costs more than my grocery run. And there, in clean, confident script, was a note at the bottom. "We hope your mother will attend as your guest of honor." I froze. "Guest of honor?" I repeated. Layla's eyes met mine. "They want you on stage with me." It hit me like a wave. The very institution that once applauded a version of my daughter that edited me out was now asking me to stand in the spotlight beside her. I wasn't sure whether to feel vindicated or terrified. The week before the gala, Layla insisted we go dress shopping together. We hadn't done anything like that in years. Not since her 8th grade formal, where we found a clearance rack dress and I altered it myself with a needle and a prayer. This time, she took me to an actual boutique. I felt like an imposter the second we walked in. Mirrors on every wall, price tags that whispered you don't belong here. But Layla grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the display racks like we were kids again. We tried on everything. She forced me into a deep emerald gown that made me feel like royalty, even though the tag made me choke. She twirled in a navy blue wrap dress and laughed at her reflection. And when I hesitated in front of a soft plum-colored dress with flutter sleeves, she turned serious. "You should wear that one." I glanced at her in the mirror. "You think so?" She nodded. "It looks like you walked out of a storybook." That was all it took. The night of the gala arrived fast. I stood in front of the mirror. The plum dress zipped up to the base of my neck, my curls pinned softly away from my face. I hadn't worn heels in 5 years. But tonight, I made the exception. Layla emerged from her room in a fitted maroon gown, sleek and simple, the kind that said I know who I am now. "You look like a magazine cover," I said. She smiled. "You look like the woman I wrote about." We drove in silence most of the way. The hotel hosting the gala was one of those towering glass buildings with valets and chandeliers, and hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. As we stepped inside, heads turned. Not because we were loud, but because we weren't supposed to be there, not like that. The two women who weren't supposed to fit in suddenly did. And not by changing themselves, by owning themselves. During dinner, people kept stopping by our table to talk to Layla. Professors, students, even a local reporter who said she was doing a story on authentic student leadership. Everyone wanted to hear her voice. But something unexpected happened. Every time they asked about her article, she redirected the spotlight. "Actually, my mom helped me find those words," she said. "You should talk to her. Her story's the one that made mine matter." At first, I thought she was just being polite. But then I saw how people reacted when she said it. The respect. The interest. For the first time in my life, people looked at me like I wasn't invisible. When the program began, the MC read off a list of honorees. Layla's name was last. And now we recognize a young woman who showed us that storytelling is not just about language, it's about legacy. Her article challenged us, moved us, and reminded us that sometimes the most powerful voices come from those who refuse to be edited out. Layla walked to the stage, calm and graceful. She took the award in her hands, smiled, then stepped to the podium. "I want to thank the board for this," she began. "But more importantly, I want to thank the person who gave me the story in the first place." She looked directly at me. My mother. A low murmur swept through the crowd as Layla motioned for me to join her on stage. I froze. She nodded gently, inviting, not pushing. So I stood. My legs were shaking, but I walked through it. And when I reached her side, she turned to the microphone. "I used to think strength looked like perfection," she said. "Now I know it looks like resilience, like showing up, like love that never asks for credit." I took the mic. My voice cracked a little, but I held steady. "I'm not used to being in rooms like this," I said. "But I'm used to being proud. And tonight, I've never been prouder." The crowd stood, applauding both of us. Not the edited version of our story, the real one. After the ceremony, we stepped outside into the night air. It was quiet, calm. The city lights stretched out like glitter. Layla looked over at me, eyes glassy. "I never thought I'd be brave enough to bring you up there." I shook my head. "No, baby. You didn't bring me up there." She tilted her head. "I was always standing beside you," I said. "You just finally turned the light in our direction." She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding that breath for years. In the days following the gala, life didn't snap back to normal. There was no return to routine. Not really. People recognized us now. At the grocery store, at the library, at the university cafe. Some stopped to say hello. Others simply stared, eyes flicking between me and Layla like we were characters in a book they'd just read. One older woman at the pharmacy looked me square in the eye and said, "I read the article. I was a single mother too. Thank you." That "thank you" carried a weight I didn't expect. It wasn't just for Layla's words. It was for surviving something invisible but universal. The kind of hardship women learn to wrap in silence. Layla began receiving more invitations, panels, podcasts, even an op-ed request from a regional magazine. Each time, she asked, "Should I?" And each time I said, "Do it. But only if it's still your voice, not theirs." She nodded, understanding exactly what that meant now. One chilly afternoon, Layla and I sat at the local park with hot coffee and a bag of leftover bread we tossed to the birds. It was quiet, just wind and pigeons and a rustle of leaves that hadn't gotten the memo that fall had passed. That's when I saw her. A woman in a red scarf, watching us from the sidewalk. Early 60s, sharp cheekbones, eyes that didn't blink enough. At first, I didn't recognize her. But then she stepped forward. "Ramona Daniels?" she asked, voice clipped. I stood instinctively, shielding Layla out of habit. "Yes," I replied, wary. "I'm Carol Branson," she said. "Martin's mother." The name landed like a cold slap. Layla's head snapped around. "Grandma Carol?" Carol gave a small, uncertain smile. "Hello, Layla." I hadn't seen her since Layla was 12. The last time she visited, she brought a sweater 2 sizes too small and a book on etiquette. We'd exchanged 3 words and a half-hearted handshake. She hadn't called since. Layla stood slowly. "What are you doing here?" "I read your article," she said carefully. "Then I watched the gala. I wanted to speak with you." I could see Layla bracing. Carol looked at me. Would it be all right if I spoke to her alone? I started to say no, but Layla touched my arm. "It's okay." I stepped away but stayed close enough to hear, just in case. Carol's voice was lower now. "I didn't know," she said. "Not really. Martin always made it sound like your mother was unstable, that she wasn't supporting you properly. That's how he justified everything. Layla's arms folded across her chest. She supported me better than anyone. Carol nodded. I see that now. I saw it on that stage. I saw it in your face. There was a long pause. Then Carol did something unexpected. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. This was something I wrote after your high school graduation. I didn't send it. I let Martin talk me out of it. He said you were starting fresh, that the past didn't need to be revisited. Layla took the envelope hesitantly. I should have spoken up then, Carol said. I didn't, but I'm here now. Layla didn't open the envelope. Not yet. But her eyes softened, just a little. Carol looked at me one more time. You raised a remarkable woman, Ramona. Then she turned and walked away down the path, the red scarf trailing behind her like punctuation on a sentence she was finally ready to finish. That night, Layla sat on the edge of her bed, envelope unopened, fingers tracing the edge. You don't have to read it, I said gently. I want to, she replied, but I'm scared. Why? Because I spent years thinking I wasn't wanted by her. What if it's too late for that to mean anything? I sat beside her. Nothing true is ever too late. Layla opened the envelope with slow fingers. Inside was a single handwritten note. Short, crooked handwriting. Layla, I saw you in that cap and gown. You looked like your mother. Stubborn. Fierce. Unapologetically good. I wish I had the courage she did. Love. Grandma Carol. Layla didn't cry. Not exactly. But she exhaled like she had been holding that grief for years. She folded the letter and slipped it into her journal. A few days later, Layla took me with her to a student-led roundtable at the university. The topic: how our stories shape us. She was one of 5 speakers. When it was her turn, she didn't just tell the article story. She told the one about the woman in the red scarf. She told the one about the lunch boxes I packed with sticky notes and how she used to pretend to hate them, but secretly saved every single one. She told the story of how silence isn't always protection, it's sometimes inherited shame, and how writing truth is a way of choosing not to pass it down. The room was quiet when she finished. Then someone asked from the audience, "What would you say to the version of yourself who didn't want her mother at graduation?" Layla didn't hesitate. I'd tell her that she didn't understand strength yet. After the event, a freshman girl approached us, tears in her eyes. I just called my mom, she said. I haven't spoken to her in 2 years. I just wanted to say thank you. Layla squeezed her hand, then looked at me. We didn't need to say anything, because we both knew. Stories don't just tell truths. They heal them. The first time Layla apologized to me, it wasn't in front of an audience. It wasn't after an article, or a speech, or a panel. It was on a random Tuesday night over dishes. I was scrubbing a baking tray that refused to come clean, muttering under my breath about stuck-on lasagna, when she dried her hands and said quietly, "Mom, can we talk?" I glanced at her. Sure. She didn't look at me right away, just kept folding the same towel over and over. I've been going through old photos, she said. The ones from that shoebox under your bed. My heart stopped a little. That box hadn't been opened in years. She continued. There was one me in a too big winter coat, holding your hand in front of the bus stop. You had no gloves on. It looked like snow had just started falling. I remembered the moment instantly. We were late. I'd given her my gloves because she was shivering, and I told her I didn't need them. My hands were red and raw by the time I got to work that day. I never told her that part. I always thought of that time as hard, she said. Embarrassing even. But looking at that photo now, all I see is you giving me everything. I set the tray down, water still running. She finally looked up at me. I'm sorry, Mom. Not just for graduation. For everything. For the way I rewrote the story. For making you invisible. The words were soft but hit like thunder. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't move me, but because I could tell how hard it was for her to say. I wanted to let her stand in that truth without being overwhelmed by it. So, I just nodded. I forgive you. She blinked, surprised. That's it. That's everything. Later that night, Layla dug out the old laptop she hadn't used since high school. She plugged it in and pulled up a half-finished story she'd written years ago. It was supposed to be fiction, she said, but it was about us. I sat beside her, curious. The story was clumsy, sweet, a little too metaphor-heavy, but the emotion underneath it was pure. It was about a girl with a mother who could turn invisible, not because of magic, but because she had trained herself not to take up space. And in the end, Layla read aloud. The daughter finally saw her. I rested my hand over hers. Maybe it wasn't fiction after all. She smiled. Maybe now I'll write the ending. The next day, we visited a bookstore downtown, indie, creaky-floored, full of the smell of old paper and new dreams. Layla had been invited to do a reading. I expected her to choose a polished excerpt, maybe from the article, or a carefully revised speech. But when she stepped to the microphone, she pulled out that high school story, the unfinished one, and she read it, not to be impressive. To be honest, the audience was small, 15, maybe 20 people. But they listened, leaned in, and when she finished, they clapped. Not politely, but warmly, like they'd just heard something true. After the reading, an elderly man approached us. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said, voice trembling. "She raised our girls while I traveled for work. I didn't really see her, not like that. Until now." He looked at me with eyes full of something like apology. "Thank you," he said. "Both of you." On the walk home, Layla was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "Do you think I'm allowed to change?" I stopped walking. "Allowed?" She nodded. "Like after everything I did? After how I acted? Do I deserve to?" I turned to her fully. "Baby, change isn't something you deserve. It's something you choose. And you already did." She looked down. "Sometimes I worry people will only ever see the version of me that hurt you." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then keep showing them the one who made it right." That night, I found a new post on Layla's social feed. Just a photo of the two of us, me in the plum dress from the gala, her in her maroon gown. We were laughing mid-sentence. Not posed. Just real. The caption read, "This is my mother." I tried to edit her out of my story. Turns out she was the story. It didn't go viral. It didn't need to. Because it wasn't for them. It was for us. The next morning, Layla came into the kitchen holding a flyer. It was an open call for essays, untold stories of real women. "They're accepting submissions until next month," she said. "Want to write something together?" I laughed. "You want me to write?" "You already have," she said. "Every word I've ever written started with you." That weekend, we sat down at the kitchen table just like the old days when she did homework and I balanced our checkbook, and we began writing. Not a speech. Not a headline. A story. Ours. Together. 6 weeks later, we got the email. The essay Layla and I wrote together had been accepted. Not just published, featured. It would headline the print edition of Untold Stories of Real Women, a national magazine known for highlighting narratives that didn't often make it past the editing room floor. Layla called me at work the moment she read it. "They loved it, Mom," she whispered, barely able to keep her voice steady. "They want to print it word for word. No cuts. No edits." I stood in the linen closet of the hotel where I still worked the night shift, surrounded by folded towels and vacuum carts, and let myself feel proud. Not just for her, but for us. The essay was called The Second Draft. It opened with a simple line. "I once wrote my mother out of my story. Now I know she was the only reason I had one to tell." We took turns writing different sections. Her voice, bold and poetic. Mine, grounded, reflective. It wasn't about painting me as perfect or pretending our journey had always been tender. It was about truth. The kind that scars and heals and reminds us we're still alive. When the magazine arrived in the mail, Layla brought it to the porch and read it aloud. Neighbors walked by, listening curiously. A few stopped. A few clapped. One woman across the street raised a fist in silent approval. When she finished, Layla closed the magazine and said, I never thought our story would matter to anyone but us. I shook my head. It matters because it's us. That weekend, Layla took me back to campus one more time. This time, it wasn't for a panel or a podium. It was for a mural. A group of student artists had been inspired by her article. They'd started a community art wall project just outside the Women's Center. The piece was titled, Unedited. It was a collage of mother-daughter silhouettes in every shape, color, and shade, some linked at the hand, others at the heart. Right in the center, painted in deep plum and warm maroon, were two women, one holding a book, the other holding a pen. Both were smiling. I stood in front of it, stunned. "You knew about this?" I asked her. Layla nodded, tears forming. They asked who inspired the colors. I told them. Plum for the dress you wore when you stopped letting me hide you, and maroon for the version of me who finally got it right. The day the mural was unveiled, I noticed something small but powerful. No one looked at me like I didn't belong. No one asked what table I was supposed to be at or why my name wasn't listed next to a donor. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't background. I was part of the picture. That evening, Layla and I returned home. She made tea. I curled up on the couch with a magazine in my lap, rereading our story. Layla sat beside me, barefoot, relaxed, lighter than I'd ever seen her. "You know what I realized?" she said, sipping her tea. "What's that?" "I spent 4 years studying power, politics, influence, trying to learn how the world worked." She paused. "But the most important lesson I ever learned came from watching you quietly carry us both when no one else would." I felt a tightness in my throat. "I didn't always carry us well," I said. "You carried us anyway," she replied. "And that's what made all the difference." That night, before bed, Layla handed me a new journal. Blank pages. No preamble. No cover design. Just a note inside the front. "Your voice built me. Now I want to read yours." I stared at it for a long time. Maybe I would write something. Not for a crowd. Not for applause. Just for me. Some stories are told in big moments, graduations, microphones, standing ovations. But others? They live in the small ones. A sandwich wrapped in foil. A pair of gloves given in the snow. A voice finally heard. A mother who stayed. A daughter who returned. Thank you for listening to our story. If it made you feel something, if it reminded you of someone you've loved or lost or grown away from, please leave a comment and tell me. Your stories matter too. And if you've ever been written out of someone's story, don't worry. There's always a second draft. And this time you get to hold the pen.